Alright guys, so round 2 underway here, tonight's Friday Night Magic Standard Tournament. The first look at our local playgroup's take on Journey into Nyx. Standard on the right, we've got Casey Skibbe. He's done with college. He's back home for the summer, and he is playing his Jund midrange deck. I think I'm correct in saying that this is not updated with any Journey cards in it, as I don't know if Casey has played Magic in several months. His opponent is Troy King, who is on Red-Green Devotion, which is basically a mono-red Devotion deck, taking advantage of Nykthos, splashing green for a couple Planeswalkers, and Xenagod. So Casey's Scries, I believe, shoving one at the bottom, though I will be honest, I did turn my head, and then follows up with a Scavenging Ooze here. So Casey's deck, if I remember correctly from the last time he was at the shop playing it, as we see Troy chain a Burning Tree into a Nykthos activation for a Frostburn Weird, which he actually loses mana in that process, but does filter it so he can cast the Frostburn. Casey's deck is basically all the red-green cards that you would expect, but with black for removal, as in the Abrupt Decay and Doomblade that he just just threw at Troy's entire board state, as well as Reaper of the Wild, Ravnica block card that a lot of people speculated on might have an impact, is yet to really do so. But put to good use here in Casey's deck. So Troy plays his fourth land, does replace his Frostburn Weird, but that eats a Dreadbore, and Casey with his excess mana going to eat all the creatures in Troy's graveyard, making a 5/5 ooze, putting Troy down to 12 already. We see the power of Scavenging Ooze. The Grizzly Bear that could. So Troy, left without a board state. 5 mana usually means a dragon. A dragon comes in tapped and attacking, couldn't block if it wanted to anyway, as that ooze has gotten out of range here. Troy just passes the turn back. Still short a couple Devotion he needs to fire off that monstrosity. Of course, at this point, Casey down to just 2 cards in his hand anyway, one of which is a Dreadbore that's going to kill this dragon. Seems like a miserable matchup for Troy in this spot, as he keeps loading threats onto the board, and Casey is nothing but removal. So now a 6/6 ooze. I think we missed a life gain trigger on the Scavenging Ooze there, but it does not matter. So Casey quickly moving up 1 game to nothing in this second round feature match. Both these players, of course, are undefeated. We're only 1 round into the tournament, but a strong showing from the Jund deck. So underway in game 2 here, Casey on the maul to 6. Troy leading off with the Temple of Abandon, and Casey ramping his mana with an Elvish Mystic. So we'll see if Troy can get on board here with an Emissary Chain. He does not, just plays a Stomping Ground tapped and passes back. Casey goes Blood Crypt into Sylvan Caryatid. Troy makes his 3rd land drop, and let's see if he can get on the board here. I know these decks play, or at least Troy's deck plays at least 1 copy of Hammer of Purphoros. I guess that could be his 3-drop of choice. We know he doesn't have a Frostburn Weird or a Burning Tree unless he drew it this turn, since he didn't play it last turn. And there's the aforementioned Hammer of Purphoros. So Hammer pretty good against the deck with all removal. Does leave you susceptible to getting Stone Rain super hard, but does give you some recurring creature threats to battle Casey's 1-for-1 removal. Casey's going to scry off the new Temple of Malady, then follow up with a Xenagos. So going to make a Satyr token. I'm going to leave it back on defense. So the oft-overlooked aspect of the hammer that it gives all of your creatures haste should be very important in this matchup. As Troy now finds a Nykthos. Really needs a Burning Tree here to be able to take advantage of it. Can't profit mana yet through a Nykthos activation as his devotion is just 2. So there's 3 mana for a Boros Reckoner. So if he gets to untap with that, he'll obviously get to generate a ton of mana through his Nykthos. Troy attacking the Xenagos here. So in case he can jump, Troy likely to redirect the damage with the trigger to Xenagos anyway, but that will keep Xenagos alive for a turn. Seems unlikely that he wouldn't do that, otherwise the alternative is just cashing in your Planeswalker here. In case you're thinking about this here, I guess if you have another Xenagos in your hand, you might consider letting this go, but I would think almost in all circumstances you would want to go ahead and chump out here. And that is exactly the line of play as expected. Redirect the damage off the Reckoner trigger to Xenagos. Then Troy just passes back, praying that his Reckoner lives. Seems very unlikely that it will. There's a Dreadbore to deal with the Reckoner. More importantly, take 3 devotion off the board. 2 mana for what's likely a Scavenging Ooze. No, a Golgari Charm. Which does take care of the legendary artifact enchantment. Golgari Charm making a lot of splash in Legacy, but I would argue the most versatile charm ever printed, period, in any format. Does a lot of work in this format where a lot of creatures are enchantments. There is a Chandra Pyromaster. Be interesting to see what he decides to do here. He decides to clean up the Xenagos and redirect, or he decides to take out the Elvish Mystic and then redirect to the Xenagos, a line I wasn't necessarily looking at, but pretty good spot to be in. We're just going to replay another Xenagos. We can make a Satyr token and take that Chandra down to 4. Seems like the play. Or take it down by 4, I should say, leaving it at 1. But no, Casey's just going right at Troy's life total here. Pretty aggressive. So Troy at 14. He has a Nykthos, he has a Chandra Pyromaster, he has 5 cards in his hand, I believe. So we'll see what he can do here. So he plays a Mountain first, so we're not going to see any Nykthos chain here. We're going to play a Stormbreath Dragon. Casey is tapped out, so no Doomblade for him. That is going to answer the second Xenagos, going to tick up that Chandra. Redirect an arbitrary 1 damage to one of his Satyr tokens. And Casey answers with a Stormbreath of his own. Excuse me. So a Satyr and a Stormbreath take care of the Pyromaster. One Satyr gets in to Troy himself. Troy cannot keep more than 2 red mana symbols on the board. Not able to profit off of his Nykthos. Though to be fair, we are quickly escaping the point of the game where the mana advantage from Nykthos does become relevant. So Troy debating his options here. Facing down a Stormbreath and 2 Satyr tokens. In a race that he is losing at this point. Though the way the game is currently played out, Casey a long way from being able to monstrous his dragon. Troy could possibly get advantage as far as dragon size go, but Troy can't really afford to leave his dragon back on defense as Casey's deck is full of removal spells. So Troy's still thinking about his options here. Cannot see the cards in his hand due to the angle which he's holding them, so can't really provide much context. What would be best here? An overloaded Mizzet Mortars wouldn't be that bad at all. It'd actually be the best thing possible, but as his board state currently stands, can't do that. So he's debating serving in with his dragon here. I can't really argue with that. Like we say, Casey can just untap, Dreadboard, Doomblade, a variety of things which would cause that dragon to go away. Here is a Domri Rod. We're going to fight the dragon against a Satyr token and just pass back with 2 mana up. Unlikely that the 2 mana is relevant. Interesting that we didn't fight dragons there. I think at some point, yeah, knowing that the removal is inbound, yeah. I think I like fighting dragons there. It's a little bit easier to deal with the Satyr tokens. You're likely to lose your Domri anyway, but Troy up against the proverbial rock and hard place. So, the turn sent back to him. He's at 10 life. He's losing this race. He needs to find an answer to a dragon. And less of a concern, but still a concern, a Satyr token. Well, there is a Boros Reckoner, so that Satyr token will have to stay home. Looks like we're short our 6 lands, so we can't activate Nykthos. Not that it matters at this point, as we'd just be breaking even on mana. As it looks like the chat has devolved into name calling. We'll turn our attention back to the game here where Troy's still trying to figure out a way to get out of this mess he's in. Casey has all the removal he has needed, even had the Golgari Charm to take out the Hammer of Purphoros. Troy cannot gain any traction here. His Domri is down. His Chandra Pyromaster is down. There is a Nykthos. I'm not sure at all why we did that thing that we just did. Can't really see any point why we would have just bend our Nykthos there. Maybe there's something I'm not seeing. But everyone is prone to mistakes, so maybe Troy just... So Troy not, yeah, he's dead on board here to a Dragon Monstrosity. There's an Ash Zealot. We now have 5 mana through a Nykthos activation, which we do in fact use here. There's a Fanatic of Mogus, redirected to Casey. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That puts him down to 9. Troy can have attacks here with the Reckoner and the Ash Zealot if he so chooses. But he's still dead to an activation from the Stormbreath, I think. I guess you just gotta play your outs and hope Casey doesn't see it. Reckoner comes in, no blocks from Casey. He's gonna untap Monstrosity, his dragon. And he does in fact see the line, so that's gonna be enough. So, turns out removal is good to have when you're playing a deck that plays big creatures. Alright, bonus action here. The first game finished quickly, so the second match appears. Garrett Meadows on the right playing American Control. He fires into a turn 2 blind obedience his opponent Nick Reid on mono green devotion. Even though he plays 2 multicolored lands, it is a mono green devotion deck. Splashing white for Rootborn defenses. And I think red for some card that I cannot remember right now. So Garrett leads his turn off with a Temple of Enlightenment, then just passes back. Here comes the Scavenging Ooze. It's going to get Azorius Charmed. Nick is going to replace it with a Voyaging Satyr, but he misses his third land drop here. There is a Jace, Architect of Thought, immediately going down, revealing Verdict, Elspeth, and Mutavault. So Nick has some choices here. None of them are good. I was very curious to see whether Garrett was going to consider possibly verdicting the Voyaging Satyr just to mana screw. But Nick chooses to not give him the land he needs. He plays his Courser of Crufix, gains a life, plays a Pithing Needle. I apologize for the glare. We did have a slightly different table position than normal. He's going to Needle Jace, Architect of Thought. So Garrett pays 4, wipes the board with his Verdict. Nick follows up with a Scavenging Ooze that we saw on turn 2. Garrett's going to shock himself, which means Elspeth is on its way. End of turn, Nick is going to grow his Scavenging Ooze. Puts him back up to 20, but he's facing down an active Elspeth with nothing on board, stuck on 3 mana here. So Nick doing a lot in his turn with the little mana he has, producing a Burning Tree as well as a Mistcutter for 2. The problem is they all come into play tapped. Cannot force through damage here. Oh my. Niv-Mizzet sighting. Garrett known to play some fun one-ofs. His high end includes not only the Super Friends, but also one Niv-Mizzet Dracogenius, which will just start murdering things here. Looks like 1, 2. He's got 2 red sources, so he can start drawing cards at will. He can start shooting things down. So Nick trying his darndest here to muster up some business of some sort. But in a world of hurt, and just passes the turn back. No attacks are very profitable. Garrett goes to the air with Niv-Mizzet. He's going to go ahead and draw a card off the trigger. An abundance of riches at this point. Adds our 7th counter to Elspeth. That means we're going ultimate next turn and winning the game. I cannot imagine what Nick could draw to get him out of this situation. Nykthos into Sylvan Primordial might be good enough. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, wouldn't even have enough mana for that. Nick just draws and passes the turn back. Garrett's going to go ahead and draw 3 cards by machine gunning him with Niv-Mizzet. Ultimate Elspeth. Attack with everybody. Nick with Rootborn defenses. It does nothing. He had 2 Rootborn defenses in his hand, trying to get Garrett with the sideboard tech. Guaranteed Garrett would not have been playing around that, but unfortunately drew 2 copies of it in a game where he could never really muster much of an on-board offense. So Garrett wins this one. Of course, both these players were down around. I think Garrett lost to Burn in round 1. We saw Nick lose to the Naya Planeswalkers deck. So Garrett back on the right track, just not Nick's week, unfortunately. Got 13 minutes left. Might have Garrett come in and talk a little bit about his deck, since there was some interest in that in the chat. Otherwise, we are going to be starting